Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from ED2467B. In this video, we will present our lab test report on motor program closed loop theory. Before we start, let's take a look on the definition of motor program. Motor program is a series of subroutine organized into correct sequence to perform a movement. It retrieves when someone needs to perform the skill. Motor program is a way in which our brain controls our movement. Basically, there are two theories that explain this concept, which are open loop theory and closed loop theory. However, in our lab report, we only focusing on closed loop theory. Closed loop theory was established by J. A. Adam in 1971 to explain motor program. It suggested that processing of afferent information was central in human motor control. It consists of two states of memory, which are memory trace and perceptual trace. This theory also stated that feedback is vital to correct movement patterns and adjust to changing needs. It stresses that type of learning in which accuracy and repetition are important for refinement of a skill.
The objective of this lab experiment is to study the effect of repeated practice in badminton low serve towards the target based on closed loop theory in motor program. Now we're going to move the importance of lab experiment. This lab test help the practitioner to identify the right procedure in organize this lab experiment. Second, we can know how does the performer to adjust the movement from get the internal feedback from the body. And lastly, help to identify the repeated practice can increase the performance of participants.
Next, we move to the methodology. In this methodology, it consists three subtopics, which is first, subject, second, material, third, procedure. For the subject, the data we'll collect is age, height, weight, and fitness level for both groups. Second, the material, which is consists of material needed for badminton sport. Lastly, the procedure for group 1 and group 2, which is for control group and experimental group. Now, let's see the data for group 1, which is control group. Now, this is the data for group 2, which is experimental group.
There are several materials needed in this test. First, badminton racket and shuttlecock. Second, badminton net. Third, score area. Fourth, score sheet.
The procedure for control group. Number 1. There are 14 students that have been chosen to participate in this test, and these 14 students will be divided into two smaller groups consist of 7 students per group. Number 2. The student required to do backhand serve technique in badminton sports. Number 3. They will be provided 10 shots per each student to gain the points. Number 4. The points will be recorded based on the shuttlecock length on the score area. Number 5. The students need to complete all the shots before switch to other student. Lastly, the students need to make sure the shuttlecock didn't pass the marking above the net when doing the serve.
The procedure for experimental group. Number 1. There are 12 students that have been chosen to participate in this test, and these 12 students will be divided into 2 smaller groups consist of 6 students per group. Number 2. The student required to do backhand serve technique in badminton sport. Number 3. For experimental group, they will provide 12 trials per each student to practice before their point is being recorded. Number 4. After 20 trials, they will provide another 10 trials per each student, and the point they gain will be recorded. Number 5. The point will be recorded based on the shuttle length on the score area. Number 6. The student need to complete all the shots before switch to another student. Number 7. Lastly, the student need to make sure that shuttle did not pass the marking above the net when doing the serve.
So this is the graph for our field lab test. From this graph, we can see clearly the mean score for experimental group 2.27 is higher than control group, which is 1.88.
Okay, now I would like to explain about the theory that is related to the test that we have done. The theory that we choose is Adams closed loop theory, which is this theory focused on the accuracy of a movement, whereby it is proportional to the strength of the perceptual trace. So the theory also suggests that the practice of the movement repeatedly can increase the strength of perceptual trace, which means they act as record of the movement made over many practice. It also tells us that there is an increase of error detection and movement adjustment when we practice the movement repeatedly. So here in our test, we have experimental group who perform 20 trials, which means the practice that they have will expectedly can increase their performance or the strength of perceptual trace. Now I will proceed with the problems that we encountered during the test. The first problem is the shuttlecock itself. This is because we have limited amount of shuttlecock during the test, so we need to use them for many times. As a result, they turn into bad conditions. So we still need to use the shuttlecock in the bad conditions. The second problem is difficult to determine. We have difficulty to determine where the shuttlecock hit the floor because the shuttlecock will bounce upon hitting the floor. The third problem is boredom. This is because the participants need to perform for many times, so they might have lost their interest toward the activities. So the results of the test might be invalid because they not do the activities in their actual performance level. The fourth problem is time consuming. This is because we need to wait for all participants to finish the activities before we can calculate the mean. Based on the problems that we encountered during the test, we have come out with some considerations or suggestions for improving the test. First thing first, we must add up the amount of the shuttlecock because we want to use the shuttlecock for the entire test. So if we use the similar shuttlecock, it might turn into bad condition and the validity of the equipment that we use might be affected. The second suggestions or considerations is to add more person in charge to look at the hitting point of the shuttlecock. As we know, we have difficulty to determine the hitting point of the shuttlecock and the floor, so we need more people to determine the hitting point so that we can get the exact one. So the third considerations or suggestion to improve this test is to provide fun with mini tournament among group members. This is to overcome the boredom that experienced by the participants when instead of we do the 20 trials without anything, we make a mini tournament among the group members so that they can compete with each other and have some fun. Moving on to the next slide, I will justify the problems that we encountered during the results interpretation. Basically, in the process of interpreting the data that we collected, we don't have many problems. The only problem that we have is time consuming. This particular problem occurred due to the process of waiting each individual to finish the test. We want everyone to finish the test first because we want to calculate the mean of the two groups that we have formed, which is control group and experimental group. When everyone have finished the test, we can find the mean and then we can compare the mean of the two groups so that we can determine which group perform better, and we can identify whether the practice give effect or not towards the performance of the participants.